Here we don't mince our words or stifle opinion, as long as those opinions and comments stay within what is just, what is fair, and what is factual. Welcome to Ladies' Night on this your Wednesday night offering of news sources, your home of absolute free thought, comment, and opinion. My name is Julie Masiga.
Indeed, it is only here where we don't shy away from questioning those with the instruments of power and those seeking power to ask opinion matters. And at times, some of the sentiments expressed here might not go down well with those who hold different views on different matters, but we allow you to have your say. I'm Sharon Momanyi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show.
Macau's application has set a very high standard. The bar is too high.
The gun shoes were too much. So we got confused. People were running.
This evening, we are joined by blogger and human rights activist Betty Waitherero and Rahma Hersi, who is a financial advisor. Well, despite being the most academically qualified candidate for the job, Professor Makau Mutua didn't make it to the shortlist for the position of Chief Justice, having been pipped to the post by Nzamba Kitonga and Justices Al Nashir Visram, David Maraga, Smokin Wanjala, Rosalind Nambue, and Musaga Mbogoli. Was this shortlist really based on merit?
Has set a very high standard. The bar is too high. So the JSC, in my view, will have a very, very interesting process. Yes, I mean, Smokin in terms of scholarship will run second to Mutua.
So was this thing really based on merit, guys? Because according to the Constitution, to be considered, you have to have at least 15 years experience as a Superior Court judge, or 15 years as a distinguished academic, judicial officer, legal practitioner, or such experience in a relevant field, or a combination of both. So it strikes me that most of these candidates, in fact, all of them must have had this basic criteria. So what else might they have based their choices on for the shortlist? Betty, if you can start.
I think that they were looking for more than just your academic qualifications. And the sort of experience that we'd say we've seen under Willie Mutunga, you'd expect that the next CJ would be more scrutinized. And in the case of Makau Mutua's application, which, by the way, I found it very strange. For a long time, he was the only applicant. And then all of a sudden,
the field was flooded.
As if people were testing the waters.
Exactly.
Who's going to put their foot in first.
Yeah. Exactly. So for me, I think that it was less about meeting the constitutional standards. They were most likely looking for something that fits into the sort of personality and experience and wisdom that they're looking for now.
That's true, but then again, sorry, before you go, Rahma, the JSC acting chairperson, Margaret Korbia, has said that the people who are shortlisted met constitutional statutory requirements and submitted complete applications. Yeah. So she herself said that they were basing it on some kind of legal requirement.
I think when it comes to Professor Makau and the fact that we're touting his academic achievements, the CJ has to be more than just your academic qualifications. You might have achieved great superiority, and I think that's what's been touted. But there has to be other factors that are being looked at. So maybe the fact that you're not just an activist, you're going to be able to uphold justice, because he does bring an activism background to it. And as we had mentioned even last week, this is a position that will require somebody who holds up civil liberties at the very highest of levels, not just somebody who has been fighting for human rights, because it's a whole other different ballgame. And maybe that reputation has preceded him. So that could also have been looked at not very well by the people who are, maybe putting him or considering his application. I think that's what I would say.
I think the other question to ask is this process completely apolitical, because Professor Makau Mutua is known to publicly, not acknowledge the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto. So there have been, thoughts that maybe this also played out because, this is the ruling government. I don't know what you think about this.
I think it's we need to be cautious when we talk about apolitical, because we would expect an institution such as the JSC to be impartial, putting in the sort of caliber of people that they're bringing on the table. But we do know that politics is never completely separated from very high positions, so there is that sticky end to consider. But I think his background, I would like to imagine that we do still come from a country that even if he has said certain things if he was qualified, then just that should have been on merit, because ultimately it is who is going to uphold the justice system of our country.
I think that's a bit simplistic. When you think about it, you have somebody who's applying for what I'd call the Cesar of Kenya position, okay? After the president and the vice president, you have this person who's going to be in charge of the entire country. You'd need him to be sober-minded. And for him to reject the legitimacy of the current president is a very serious legal matter. It's not just a political matter. It actually reflects on his ability to make a decision that is legally justified, and that's very important. I would say it's not just something you can brush off, where somebody openly and publicly and more than once just rejects the legitimacy of the elections and the presidency.
But isn't that his personal opinion? Surely
Right.
he's allowed to hold his personal views about elected
and even
officials.
if he does, and he was given that position, the decision, if we were to go into elections, because that's also been the concern, right? So if we go into elections, he wouldn't be the only deciding factor. He would be one of 5 judges, and his opinion wouldn't be the only one that was considered. So there would still be some sort of impartiality in that regard. At least that's how I would
But to what
see.
extent because there would be a perception issue here, I imagine, because should we go into elections and people already are aware of your bias, then to what extent should that also be considered in?
Yeah, but it's easy when you already know whose bias is, because the other
That's actually
4,
a
we
fair
don't know what their biases are. At least his is open, right?
But then back to matters of apolitical and political, because the former Chief Justice came out to say that he believes there are forces within the judiciary and without the judiciary who are trying to install perhaps the candidate of their choice. So that could also be a factor in this.
You see, that's exactly, now we're going back to it's not just his opinion.
All right, the buzzer has gone off,
Okay.
so just hold that thought and we'll continue with that. And despite being the most academically qualified candidate for the job, Professor Makau Mutua, I'll take that again. We are looking at his 84-page CV right now, and Makau Mutua's 84-page CV was seen as an added advantage to get the top judiciary job, and reports now indicate that the human rights advisor was rejected for his public proclamation that he does not recognize President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto as the country's leaders, despite a ruling by the Supreme Court. Could this have been his downfall? And you are actually just responding to that.
Well, you see, as I've said, if you have a situation where you have factions that are trying to put in the candidate of their choice, that means that this person that they're preferring has political or whatever sort of opinions that they feel resonate with them, and that's when it becomes more than just your personal opinion. It becomes a reflection of the kind of leadership you'll provide to the Supreme Court, and so I would say genuinely feel that his statements was very strong at the time. Showed a total disregard for the democratic process of 2013.
Right. An 84-page CV.
I
Do
know.
you see this every I mean, what do you think
Qualifications
about
as
the
long
Rahma?
as his arm right
84 is a lot of reading, so I guess the JSC
So
must
I'm
have been
sorry,
very
he was
busy. Yeah.
disqualified right at that.
But I mean, it can be 84 pages of either relevant stuff,
Yeah.
or you're literally putting in every conference, publication, newspaper article that you've written. But I think his downfall might not necessarily. I mean, I beg to differ with Betty, because if it was his personal opinion, I would like to imagine, and I do hold this belief that we can rise above that, because this is a very important institution.
Right.
To then say that there's machinations and stuff happening behind the scene is problematic, because then we do not hold these institutions in the regard that we should. So that to me sounds almost conspiracy based, because it's speculative.
On
There
our
isn't
part
on
as-
our
as-
parts.
or as-
No, on our parts,
Right.
because really it has not been proven, other than the fact that he did share. You know, we don't know what the other candidates are bringing to the table. It could be 84 pages, but that's just it. Maybe somebody like Dr. Smokin Wanjala has a lot more exposure and experience and understands the intricacies of this country. So does Kenneth Miranda. So I think we're just holding on to one aspect of what Professor Makau is, and
I think
the fact that he's always been very anti, or maybe has expressed his thoughts, that I think that was his personal belief.
Yes, and this field, they were quite well qualified. Quite a few of them have doctors of philosophy.
Yeah.
Makau himself has a Doctor of Science of Laws, I
Yeah,
think.
SJD,
Yes,
yeah.
highfalutin degree that he has
Yeah.
there. So many of them were supremely qualified for
Right.
this position. But then again, I do agree with you, Rahma, and I'll come back to you, Betty, that despite what he felt about the election in 2013 and what happened there, and given that he's applying for a legal position, he should be able to separate his personal views from his job. And these are the kind of this is the kind of thing we should expect from the highest officials in the land. So
We should expect it, but what is the history? I mean, let's go down that road as well. We have a situation where the previous CJ has often expressed opinions. They are of a personal nature, but then some of those opinions, he talks about cartels, he talks about a bandit economy, and the next thing you know, it's not just an opinion, it's actually a reality.
fact, yeah.
You know, when we're talking about judicial reforms, this was mentioned that there's a pushback, there's corruption and whatever. So for me, I feel that yes, okay, you can have a personal opinion, but at the same time, it really reflects on your ability to make judgments that are on behalf of the entire country. That having said that, I do agree with Rahma that there are other people there, and they should be able to balance it out. Beyond that, his 84-page CV, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
When I went through it, the guy has actually done a lot of stuff. So Mr. Mutua, Professor, has done a lot of stuff in his legal his career as a legal person, a lawyer, professor, and most of the stuff that was relevant, published things that he's done. He's held various human rights positions, which makes me wonder: do we want just an ordinary judge, or do we want somebody with a bit of activism, running through their veins, if they're going to look out for the Kenyan people? Sharon.
Right, and of course this became a big point of critique for the outgoing, or rather, the former CJ, that he was an activist CJ. And I think really, especially for the kind of issues that we deal with in the country, I would say a little bit of activism, because we have, I think the space for the practice of law also has to be within context, I would say. And I would...
The question becomes what's too little and what's too much, right? These are very subjective, because Professor Makau has really established his career on human rights a lot more than the former CJ, I think. Yeah.
Good point.
All right, and of course the other issue that has really come to the fore with regard to this entire issue has been the criteria, that the Judicial Service Commission has used to shortlist these nominations. And of course, Julie, right now we have the right of reply.
Well, the Law Society of Kenya has today written to the JSC asking it to make public the criteria used to shortlist applicants for the CJ position. This, they say, will help clear the speculation, since among those left out are Professor Makau Mutua and Supreme Court Justice Jackton Ojwang. We are now joined by the LSK Chair, Isaac Okello, and we're asking Mr. Okello, why do you want the criteria to be made public? Do we have him on the line? Mr. Okello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
The first question I would like to ask you is why you are seeking to have this criteria made public.
Well, first of all, let me correct the pronunciation of my name. It is Okero, O-K-E-R-O.
Okay, I apologize for that, sir.
No problem. Well, precisely so that there isn't the speculation that we've been seeing beginning to take hold within the conversation. We are aware that once the publication of the requirements was made in the newspapers, candidates obviously would have submitted their applications in conformity with those requirements. Once the shortlisting stage has been passed, then in order for there to be minimizing of this sort of speculation, there will be no difficulty in just releasing the reasons why certain people have not been shortlisted, and it was a request that I made in a written letter to the Judicial Service Commission, asking that they make this public so that the public confidence in the process is not undermined by speculation that can begin to gain currency when there might well be valid reasons why certain applicants were not shortlisted.
So speculation, is it really a matter of concern that people are speculating why people were shortlisted or not? Because surely this is a process that the JSE is carrying out in the manner it's supposed to go. So should they be playing perhaps to the court of public opinion, or should they just be doing their jobs?
Well, it doesn't detract from the job that they're doing at all for them to release this information. Informing the public that so-and-so has not made it because they failed to have this or that doesn't detract from their job. Their job continues. But it's important to maintain the highest public confidence in the process. And it was my feeling that this would be undermined if, in light of all the speculation, there is silence. It's not necessary at all, I think.
So are you suggesting that the process was somehow unfair, the shortlisting process?
Not at all. All I'm suggesting is that in order for the public to remain confident in the process, share the information. We are observing a process being undertaken under the new constitutional dispensation that recognizes that the public is entitled to information. So why not? It doesn't detract from the work that they're doing or undermine the process anyway. In fact, I would think it would enrich the process to be able to avail this information.
Fair enough. And are you also going to ask them to release the criteria for the shortlisting of the Deputy Chief Justice position, or is this just limited to the Chief Justice position?
Well, my communication to them was out this morning before news of the results of the shortlisting process for the Deputy Chief Justice came out. But in general, my suggestion would be just share this information so that the public are aware.
Sharon, perhaps you have a question? Rahma?
No, I'm good.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Okero. I apologize for getting your name wrong. Now I think we can move on to the next story.
Right, it's a wrap for judiciary matters, and political analyst Mutahi Ngunyi has now said that he will refund any excess monies paid to his consulting firm. In a letter to Public Service Cabinet Secretary Cecily Kariuki, Ngunyi says the company's board instructed him to audit the company accounts to determine the allegation that NYS paid him an excess of 12.5 million shillings. Ngunyi says should the monies be found, they will be promptly refunded to the ministry, the Treasury, or the NYS. He has also asked the CS to investigate the payment and determine whether it was made in error. Now, there's something about this whole letter and what he's saying that doesn't add right. I mean, it's your company. How do you not know if monies are made in excess? I don't know. Help me understand.
I definitely would notice 12 million extra in my bank account.
In your bank account, right?
That's
you want an external
That's an indication of how much money is sitting around in there.
In fact, why would somebody have to tell me that this happened?
And then also investigate whether they paid somebody.
Yeah,
paid me in excess.
did you pay me?
Maybe 12.5 is what is just the least that he usually gets. It's maybe a lot more.
Actually, I think he was being paid quarterly. He was being paid almost 40 million shillings, but he was being paid in tranches of 12.5 million. So somewhere along the way, some 12.5 came and he didn't notice that it had come.
Really?
So this is what he's saying, that he would
But you
refund
see,
it.
he is expecting to be proven guilty, and that's what you do when you ask people to come and investigate. If he comes out, then he gets himself into a lot of trouble if he's taken the loot, right?
So it's a strategy. So I'm throwing it to you.
Yeah.
Come here,
all the way.
prove that there was an excess of this
Show
money
me the
paid.
paper trail of
Actually,
the money
he
coming
can-
in and going out.
And he can easily, as you said, it's a strategy. He can easily just sit there and say, you know what, I didn't even know about this, so it's not me who has a problem here.
In
Take
fact,
your money back.
investigate the people who tried to put that
Exactly.
money into my bank account.
Yeah, and it's kind of throwing it back onto the
Yeah.
board of directors of his company, and he was told to audit the company. So it's like the legal person of the company is separate from him. But why is it coming out now, though, Sharon?
Yeah,
What-
that's the big question. And I
Yes.
think the eye of the storm really was that these payments were made illegally. So I could find maybe 1 million was made in excess, but still the question is, why was it made in the first place? 38 million that, so there was all these allegations of why, to what, for what reason. So chicken and egg situation.
And he was being paid for the implementation of a 5-point vision strategy for the
Yes.
NYS, which is such a fluid term.
Yes.
What exactly is a 5-point vision strategy, and did he actually produce what he was paid to do?
You
I
know,
remember
if
when
we
this
could,
came out, he said that why are we all, gasping that 38 million shillings is really nothing for a security firm that is consulting across 18 countries, if I remember right. Yeah.
it's not nothing. I mean, that's just a ridiculous statement, if you ask me. Even $1,000 is something. It's a legal fee. It's a billing that you've done. You asked me what is a 5-point. I have no idea. If I knew, I'd be the one
Yeah, you'd be
receiving.
getting that
so I will credit him with that. You are a genius in that regard. But
a magician.
yes, but the fact that monies came in, you know, there's usually, I thought, with companies, usually you invoice and that's how it works. So I don't know how you are paid, and then you didn't know that you were paid, and then you're invoicing, and then there are receipts going out, right?
There's some kind of paper money trail.
We can give
with-
him
with
the benefit
companies.
of doubt. No, I don't know.
And
There
until
was
the
some-
investigations are complete,
Yep, okay.
and he is pleasantly surprised that the money, just miraculously happened, we can't really speculate.
can't
right?
really
But
say
sometimes
either
it
way.
happens. I mean, someone erroneously sent you 1,000 bob on
I
M-Pesa,
would love to
and
have
you
friends
had
like that.
50,000
I
on
would
M-Pesa.
love, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't notice.
Sorry,
You
wait,
think
wait,
this
wait,
is-
wait.
1,000, 12.5
Come on,
million,
guys.
40
I want to
million.
make friends like that.
like an-
No, wait.
Drop
First
in
of
the
all,
ocean.
when you receive, you see, this is my problem. When you receive money on M-Pesa, there's a message, okay? Is he saying that he didn't notice that this money
But you
came
can
in?
receive that notification, but then notice it's 1,000 bob and say, I'll get to it later. Like, it's not
It's
a matter
not
of
a
urgency.
priority.
to
But you
find
have
out
a
where-
record immediately. You can
Yes.
see. Oh, actually,
Or
so
at-
this is-
yeah.
No,
But
I
okay,
think
fine.
that-
This is a bank
Or
account
if I
now.
get to a point where now I want to know where that one, I think the point would be where I want to know where that 1,000 came from.
Yeah.
I have a track record of all these
And
transactions.
I think a
Yeah.
bigger problem is also that money has lost value in this country. We used
Yeah.
to talk about millions being stolen, now billions are being
Right.
stolen.
Yeah,
So when
million.
somebody throws around the figure 12.5 million, like, that's not so bad.
become numb
yeah,
to
compared
this.
And
to
I think, and I
billions
think
being
the
stolen.
the due process just has to be followed, because we cannot be a country that does not account for where our public funds are going.
Right.
So we are taking this lightly because there's a saying that says, when you don't know what else to do, just laugh about it. But the reality is we do need to follow some sort of due process. So he has the right to say what he's saying,
Right.
and the authorities have a right to investigate that and reach a certain conclusion, I would imagine. If there was, that was, yeah. If there was, that's
True.
Yeah.
I still find his statements are just a bit strange. If it was, I don't know. I've seen. I'll give an example. USIU today was, protesting.
Demonstrating, yes.
Okay, let's call it demonstrating over alleged land grab, and the law companies involved, the lawyers involved with the people they have a dispute with, have produced statements that are quite clear about the land, the land rate number and what have you. Here he is, and it's so ambiguous. I'm thinking, wouldn't you say on this date, this is what happened, and this is how much we received, and this is the area of contention, and this is our findings, or it's not about, I don't know.
What he is saying is they're going to audit their accounts, obviously.
Yeah.
So they're going to find the paper trail if they don't already know what that is. And he's also invited the Treasury and the Ministry to come in and investigate. So he's ostensibly
So the
he's trying
authorities,
to...
yes,
Yeah.
they should now go in and do because he's not going to come out and say that what's happened to the money. If you don't want to necessarily implicate yourself. So remaining grey and ambiguous is a good way to go about
And also
that.
we should not forget that we seem to have forgotten as a press, Anwai Guru, and where this whole thing started. The trail kind of went cold. And Mutahi Ngunyi was one of the, was it hundreds? About 100 people or companies who received money from the ministry during that time.
Right.
And he's, so far I think he's the only one who's come out publicly to say, I got this money irregularly.
But then the big question is, why now, as you asked? Why is he coming now?
We're reminding you today about our Twitter poll, which is actually, should the JSC make public the criteria to shortlist applicants for the CJ position? I say again, should the JSC make public the criteria used to shortlist applicants for the CJ position? You can reach us at Julie Masiga, at Sharon Momanyi, at KTN News, hashtag news sources. Now we're going to go for a break. Don't go far, we'll be right back.
Strategic plan. So I have to watch.
But that's what consultants do, right?
But he's actually
What's the next thing we were talking about?
You
Me
go,
or Sharon?
You go, Jacob.
Sharon, so
Sorry?
I do the Twitter poll reminder?
Then I do the
Okay.
doctor.
Oh, so I just read it out. All right. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, this seat is quite a problem.
Right, so tonight we're asking you, should the JSC make public the criteria used to shortlist applicants for the CJ position? Should the JSC make public the criteria used to shortlist applicants for the CJ position? You can reach us on at Julie Masiga, at Sharon Momanyi, at KTN News, and hashtag news sources.
Now, fresh claims have emerged of doping among Kenyan and foreign athletes. Two Kenyan doctors, filmed by the Sunday Times of London, have claimed that they administered performance-enhancing drugs to athletes in training. St. Luke Medical Orthopedic and Trauma Hospital in Eldoret, as well as the High Performance Training Center in Iten, who are implicated in the documentary, have denied the claims.
Katai, shida za doping ziko, lakini Kenya ni nchi wazi. Na tumekataa kata kujaribu kutufananisha sisi na nchi kama Urusi.
Right. Personally, I'm still coming around this whole doping scenario with our Kenyan athletes. What's your take on this, ladies, with the latest accusation and counter-accusations by this documentary?
I mean, I have a whole other thought process when it comes to this.
Right.
First of all, if you look at just the statistics of athletes doing doping, almost every country has been implicated. There is hardly any country that can say they don't have an athlete. We were just checking, doing research today that even a country such as Somalia, that's a fragile state, has athletes that are on that list. Now the question is more than that. What are we doing to our athletes? When has sports become such a big business that people are willing to harm themselves? I think we're losing the focus here. It's not so much the fact that we're being caught with doping, because that doping is happening across the board, across the globe. What is the incentive to these athletes that they're willing to harm themselves? What is the narrative behind that? I think that's completely being eroded, because as a human being, if you're going to harm yourself just to be able to win at that level, there has to be a problem. And then we also have the issue of the fact that we are being picked on. I think as an African country, right? We've got countries in a lot more problems than we are. Yet that has never. Look at Maria Sharapova, and we've got Lance Hamilton. These were completely looked over. Whereas we've got 2 or 3 athletes, and all of a sudden we are going to have to explain ourselves.
Rahma, we have about 40 or so elite athletes who have been banned or investigated for doping at the moment. But when you're talking about what would incentivize them to harm themselves, I was speaking to a sports journalist earlier today just to contextualize this, and he was saying many of these athletes are not even even aware that they're doping, because between their managers and the doctors they're sent to, and perhaps their level of education, they're not aware what's being put into. Yes, he says they're not aware what's being put into their system. And just the other day in Eldoret, 2 Italian managers were arrested and not charged, but are being investigated for narcotics-related type offenses when it comes to athletes. And these people manage people like Aspel Kiprop. They managed Rita Jepto, who was banned for 2 years the other day. So I'm sensing that it's perhaps a much bigger problem, like you're saying, a worldwide problem. And many Kenyan athletes are getting sucked into this thing. Some of them
so if unknowingly, then it's the business drive then behind it, your managers and all that.
Absolutely.
But there's also the question of, the other day we were having the Olympic trials here, and if I'm not wrong, about 4,000 athletes turned up. By the end of the day, they only selected 3. So now you see the reason why the competition is so high, the pressure is so high. So you would look for any way to just make it, and you know that this is like the only way out for a lot of people. At least it's their way to make it big and to change their lives and the lives of probably the entire village. So when you look at it that way, you can understand why they'd be more susceptible. But then again, she says something very important. Maria Sharapova was
slap on the wrist.
She banned and then now she's gotten back her
apparently she did not know that it was a performance enhancing drug. It was there to cure some sort of illness, whereas some of these guys actually take it for medical reasons. So when does it become okay? Is it based on a objective test, or is it based on the color of your skin?
That's a big question. And also, how are we approaching it as the Ministry of Sports? Punitive? Right, okay. I'm told I need to move on.
All right, let's just hold those thoughts there. Well, after days of renewed fighting, a fragile ceasefire seems to be holding the world's youngest nation. Rival forces, loyal to the President Salva Kiir and to the Vice President Riek Machar, had been in battle since last Friday, almost 5 years to the day after South Sudan declared independence from Sudan. Is there hope for lasting peace?
The gunshots were too much. So we got confused. People were running. Since that time, since that Saturday till now, the bullets and the shooting, even at night we see the gunfire, the bullets in the air moving in red color. So we are afraid, even we fear to go back.
Peacekeepers were able to conduct a limited number of short patrols in Juba today. Since the fighting began on Friday, some 5,000 additional displaced people have sought protection in the UN's Tomping compound in the capital. Another 3,000 IDPs who arrived in the UN House premises have been relocated to the protection of civilian sites nearby.
So this is a sad, sad story. Really sad, because the country, it looked like things were very promising with the peace talks and all the rest of it. And now about hundreds of people dead, thousands displaced. The first thing that comes to my mind is the refugee crisis, because we're trying to close the Dab as Kenya at the moment, and now South Sudan is erupting, and there's going to be such an inflow of refugees. As a region, have we done enough perhaps to support this youngest brother, sister of ours?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, even the process towards them becoming an independent state has always been tenuous, with periods of peace. So now it's been more of tension and heavy conflict.
And a few lucid moments in between.
And a few lucid moments. And this particular peace process that they created was, I don't know, to me, as an outsider, it looked like Nusumkate. But you see, there's a lot more politics that's going on between the two factions. And I think that we make things overly simplistic when we look at it as an ethnic thing. It's not that. There's a lot at stake, and the things that we can't really look at superficially without getting into it.
But if not ethnic, then what, Rahma?
I mean, I think just my viewpoint is I don't think we've done enough as a region. This was a country that's very young, that needed to be supported, not just in the peace process, but help them through the transition. We cannot deny it's very wealthy, and that has also been causing a lot of issues in terms of people imagining or saying that this will not bring them peace, because there's a lot of invested interest in Southern Sudan as a country. But over and above is the loss of human lives, and I think we are all responsible for that. because these are our African brothers. These are mothers, children, families that are completely destroyed, that have hardly known peace before they got independence, and now continue not to have peace. So before we can even have a conversation about what are the other vested interests, is to try and find them safety and security, because we cannot in the 21st century still have these conversations, especially in our region. As you said, we don't have the resources to absorb any more people into the country, so we need to be able to help them.
But who takes responsibility?
And in this process, I mean, it has been an ongoing process, really. The peace talks, we've had several deals that they go back on. We had the August deal. So as Betty says, there really is a bigger problem, maybe, and that it has to be a structural issue. That what is the structure of this deal that they are striking? What is the bigger picture? I mean, I may not have the answers, but if we are making these deals that we keep going back on, so it means there are possibly some other factors that need to be considered, and that said, more support from the international community, of
the
course.
African Union as
the
well.
African Union, they
absolutely. We have
critiqued that
institutions.
their response has been very slow, perhaps most of the time reactive.
The AU has a history, now we're used to it, I guess, that they do not respond in time, that they do not bring the warring factions to the table in time. Maybe it's because there's so many countries in conflict, but I think that they actually take sides when it comes to these more fragile states, and we've seen that in the Central African Republic and Mali as well. So it wouldn't surprise me that some AU member states would be taking sides in this, but I think that when it comes to maintaining a ceasefire, you have a lot of let me finish the sentence. You have a lot of residual resentment between the different factions, and so there's always that need to retaliate. You killed mine, and I'll have to kill yours.
Right, and with the AU summit going on right now, the biggest problem that has come on point is the issue of funding. That without funding, is it a toothless dog? A bigger conversation, of course, to continue later. And now the Ugandan police have resorted to caning to restrain ecstatic Besigye supporters. Besigye was arrested in May after a video went viral showing his swearing-in ceremony. Besigye has disputed February's election in which President Yoweri Museveni was re-elected.
If you want to be a leader in the opposition of a dictatorship, you must be comfortable to expect and live with those kinds of consequences. So whenever I'm arrested, I am at peace with myself.
My, that is a hard video to watch. I mean, resorting to caning the supporters. What is this coming to? What are your thoughts on that?
There's so many questions I was having. I was just thinking, what is this guy doing? What are you doing? But then it looks like he's trying to get these people, there's a barrier there. He's trying to get them off the barrier and get them away from the road. I can't tell exactly what was going on. It doesn't, I don't know, it's just a bit weird. But having said that, what are you doing? You're so brutal. What are you doing?
Caning people, because this is the footage that we got from our partner station in Uganda, NBS. So what they say that this Besigye supporters lining there by the barrier, and the police officers are trying to restrain them. But I mean, the method of caning, I mean, it's
a bit extreme.
Rule of the jungle.
But you know, Museveni has been in power for decades now, I suppose, and the Ugandan people have not really risen up against him. And when you see these kind of pictures, you can see some of the things that perhaps keep them subdued. Because I'm sure some Kenyans are saying that Kenyans should be given similar treatment, given like the IBC protests and stuff. I'm sure that's a thought going through some people's heads. But this is super cruel. It's just beyond. And they were welcoming him home after being 2 months in prison on treason charges. So there should have been some level of
civility, really, and
civility.
human dignity, in which
And allow
whatever
them
kind
the
of
room.
circumstance should always come first, I think.
Yes,
really.
but Ram, what are your thoughts on this? I think Besigye J has been consistent in trying to get justice and democracy in Uganda.
I think,
So,
I think that definitely as Africans and as an African nation, we still have a long way in how we express our disagreement on both sides. Whether it's the ones who were supporting President Museveni and also the opposition, Besigye. And I think those are the conversations we need to have. We can talk about brutality, but again, how are we teaching our people how to properly, address these sort of things, and also the leaders, because we need to be able to disagree without reaching those points, I think.
It seems to me that now that I've seen, I've just been watching the footage and trying to,
you're getting beyond the
understand.
shock to actually know.
So it seems to me that there's a lot of exuberance and he's enthusiastically supported, and that the state has great resentment towards that. And which is a tragedy, because you cannot hold elections and then expect people not to enthusiastically support their preferred candidate. It's a bit absurd. Besides that, you've already won. So what's this? I don't understand.
The buzzer really loves Betty.
well, elsewhere, Sports Cabinet Secretary Hassan Mario's ex-wife has sued him for 400,000 shillings in spousal support. Kaltum Huyo says she needs the money for food, rent, transport, medical expenses, grooming, and entertainment. She claims she paid his school fees while they were married. And so does she have a case? Does she have a case, good people?
I mean,
So
my
I-
answer is pay her.
My question is,
think-
pay her for what? For
No,
being
so
married to you?
yes, okay. So I think this is how we'd look at it.
Feminine support, right?
If you look at it from an Islamic legal standpoint, the marriage the legitimacy of you being supported by your spouse, and in this case the husband, because he's in Islamic law, he's the provider. As a woman, you do not spend from your pocket
right.
unless you choose to, right? So the legitimacy here is the marital institution. Now, if you walk away willingly from that marital, and even if you don't walk away willingly, I mean, as long as a divorce happened and children are not involved, or if they are involved, then his responsibility is to the children. And helping you take care of the children, but not necessarily to you.
And in this case,
And-
if I read it right,
Yes.
there were no children
So in this case, there would be you walk away from. So the his responsibility to you ends, because in Islamic law, you're allowed to remarry. So do you then allow somebody to continue providing ad nauseum just because you were married to them before? So you have to look at the balance of justice in that regard. Now, I do not know what court she's using. I'm
I
just
think she used
mentioning.
an English court,
I'm
I think, yeah.
I'm assuming she's
Right.
probably using our regular
But then
family
her
court.
case would
But
hold
I'm
in
just
an
talking
Islamic
about it
court.
from because they probably got married through an Islamic legal marriage, and that's probably how they got divorced.
Right.
And if you were to look at it from a legitimacy, and it also happens in common law.
Yeah, in common
What's
law
your locus
actually-
standi, right?
Yeah.
You're no longer married to this person. Can you then demand spousal support?
But I think they do say that as long as you become accustomed to a certain way of living and you've been married to this man for a certain number of years,
Right.
then he's beholden to you to maintain that standard of living for, I guess, a certain number of
Yeah.
years. So technically, she's entitled to get some money from the guy, but I think she should have more. I don't know if it's more pride than that or what. I don't
No,
know.
actually, if you asked me, I don't know his financial status, but if she had reached a point where she's accustomed to having her needs met to that tune, and here's an area where I'm begging to disagree with you slightly. The little that I've read about Islamic nikah is that even if the woman is divorced, he is supposed to provide something towards her upkeep.
Not at all.
Yeah?
No,
Is that
not at all.
forever?
My specialization is actually Islamic
Okay.
law. And I'll tell you this. His responsibility is in maintaining his children.
Okay.
That if you're taking care of his children, up until either you remarry, or he takes custody, or even if you do share custody, his responsibility is to the children.
Does
The custody-
circumstances of your
Because ideally, what you should have done, and this is as a woman, as a Muslim woman, is you have the right to demand before you get married whatever bridal gift you can get. And it's very different from dowry. It is not dowry, it's a bridal gift to you. Why? Because this is almost your insurance when you're getting into the marriage, in the sense that You could always take care of yourself financially later on. But after, if you're the one who initiates the divorce, then you give back part of the bridal gift and walk away. If he does, then he maintains you and the children in terms of the children. But if you're no longer together, the idea is not to continue burdening either party. Because you see, once you get divorced, the idea of where we punish each partner is a very new phenomenon. It wasn't even there in our African tradition. Now we look at it as, you know, I suffered, I took care of you, you went to school, I was at home, you know, I was...
So that's very good information.
I have been schooled on that perspective because I read this story and I read it from a completely different perspective. I was saying I could actually get married for business, because marry them, get divorced, then
get divorced and have somebody take care of me. Absolutely.
That's very messy though.
It is.
So we have to end the show there, ladies. We've had so much fun. Time has really flown. Thank you so much for coming to join us and sharing your thoughts with us. And the question that we asked you on our Twitter poll tonight was: should the JSC make public the criteria used to shortlist applicants for the CJ position? And the results here show that 75% of you say yes, that they should make public this criteria. 22% of you say no. 3% of you are not sure. So that's where we wrap up today's edition of News Sources. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sharon Momanyi, my colleague
Julie Masiga. Thank you so much for watching. We'll meet again next week on Wednesday.
Thank you, Rahma and Betty, for joining us. Have a good night.